Welcome back to Lee Anderson's Real World, and we're going back in the day now with Wilfred Emmanuel Jones. Welcome to the show.
Well, it's nice to be here. It's nice to meet the real man in real life, so thank you for inviting me.
Now then, you've had a checkered life. You were born in Jamaica in 1957, a little bit older than me, Wilfred, and you moved to the UK in 1961. I think you came after your parents. What was it like for you as a young man coming to this great country of ours?
Well, you could imagine as a 4-year-old coming to this country. I could actually remember when I came here, it was in the winter, so it was the first time that I'd ever seen snow.
Yeah.
And it was a big culture shock because it would have been the first time that I'd seen my parents in 3 or 4 years. But that's the thing that happened in those days, is that actually people like my parents decided to leave their country of birth to come to this country in order to further their lives and the lives of their children. And one of the things I like to remind people of is this: it takes a real entrepreneurial minded person to do that, because for everyone who came, there's a lot of people who didn't, because they didn't want to change their lives. So I'm really grateful that my parents had the courage to come here, because it gave me all the opportunities that I then actually had.
But it's courage, and it's a gamble as well.
It's really, I just think, I like to remind people from black backgrounds, is look, you've got to go and really celebrate your parents, because it was a very courageous thing to do in order to give you an advantage. Not for you to be a victim, it's to give you an advantage. And so one of the things makes me very, very cross is that actually over time, with some people that develop this sort of victim culture. We're not victims.
So I don't want to create stereotypes here, Wilfred, but every single person I speak to from Jamaica seem to have cooking in their blood. They've got a passion for cooking. Why is that?
Well, actually, you're right. So anybody from Jamaica would tell you about how fantastic they are with their foods. And if we had time, I could actually tell you about the origins of foods. And so jerk is what everybody would know about in the Jamaica. And the origins of jerk actually was from the slaves. So what would happen is that the slaves had a way of marinating the meats, so it actually could taste quite well, and they had to smoke it so the slave hunters couldn't see the smoke. So that's the origins of those sort of.
But then you went one further and actually got a career doing this in TV.
Well, actually, my career has been in food. So I started off actually as a chef. And my claim to fame is that I gave people like Gordon Ramsay his first break, because I went from being a chef, I then went to work in television as a producer, director, making food programs, traveling the world making food shows. I then left the BBC and formed my own food and drink marketing agency. So I launched brands like Lloyd Grocer and Sauces, Kettle Chips, Smith Gin. And then I created my own brand, The Black Farm, when I bought my farm down in Devon.
Let's talk about your farm. Say it's called
It's my farm. I'm not going to give the address in case I get people coming down there, but it's on the Devon-Cornwall border. I've had this farm now. It's coming up to about 28 years.
Wow.
So you can imagine 28 years ago buying this farm. And I can remember when I wanted to buy this farm, people say to me, well, why are you wanting to buy a farm down in Devon? All this sort of metropolitan types are saying, well, don't they lynch black people down there? And one of the things I find really, really frustrating is there's this prejudice about people from rural Britain. Even today, there's a massive prejudice, and it's based on people who have absolutely
And why is that, Wilfred?
Well, it's based on naivety and people not having any real knowledge of what
ignorance.
It's absolute ignorance. And I think the thing is that I feel safer being in rural Britain than I would be in urban Britain. You could rely and depend on your neighbours. You need to rely and depend on each other to be able to sort of.
So you've gone from the kitchen to the farm. So you're going where it all starts, where we grow our foods and rear our livestock, whatever. But there's not many black farmers in this country. Why is that?
The reality is this, is if you and I had to go out and buy land today, it's very, very expensive. Most people who own land, they haven't had to go and buy it. It's been passed down through the generations. That's why you don't see many black people in farming, because it's a pretty expensive business. So one of the things that I really like to try and champion is that we need to get fresh blood in the farming community. Definitely need to do that. And the way to do that is there is a lot of land that's owned by big institutions in this country, whether that's the Church of England where there's a national trust.
Good one.
And what I would like them to do is to go out and search for people from non-traditional farming black backgrounds, and to give those people a helping hand to start into food and farming.
So, Wilfred, there will be some people out there, a certain section of society who spout this nonsense about the countryside is racist, maybe farming's racist because there's not many black farmers. How would you respond?
Well, it's one of the things that really annoy me, because in my experience, that isn't the case. And I think what happens is this. If you are a stranger, whether you're black, whether you're white, and you turn up into an area, people are going to look at you. It's like, well, what are you doing here? Because part of your security living in the rural Britain is knowing your people. I've had people come down my lane, white people down my lane, and it automatically puts you on alert to think, well, you know, what are you doing here? Maybe that they're lost.
Yeah.
I mean, only about, you know, a year ago, some Poles and Russians came down, and you're looking at that, what's going on, because you don't look as though you're familiar.
Yeah,
So
I get that.
I'm not going to say that actually racism doesn't exist. People do experience it, but I do think that rural Britain really gets unfairly treated. And it tends to be metropolitans who have this perception, intellectuals have this perception
the intellectual.
that actually, that if you're black, you're going to have a difficult time. You know, that isn't my experience, as I said. What you really rely on is people that you know.
The intellectuals, Wilfred. I mean, I call them the educated idiots. And there are, I mean, you've got a shop in Brixton.
Yeah.
How would you get young black kids out of a place like Brixton? It's got its problems, we know it has, and get them interested in farming and have a great career.
I always wanted to have a farm shop. And the decision that I made is that I wanted my first farm shop to be right in the heart of Brixton, because it sends a very clear message that you can be black and also be part of rural Britain, to be part of farming. So what you need, and this is what I say to a lot of black people, our parents were pioneers. They came to this country to give us a break. And what we need to do, the second and third generation, is to branch out and to be part of the rest of Britain, rather than feeling that there's only a certain part of Britain that we could live in, there's only certain jobs that we could do. In terms of our creativity, our ideas, that could work really well in rural Britain. So the only way you're going to stop doing that is to get rid of this idea that rural Britain is racist. Because if you keep actually saying that, black people are going to think that this is a foreign land, and the people who are accusing...
But Wilfred, it's not black people that are saying that the countryside is racist.
That's exactly my point, is that it's white liberals. I've always felt that actually the greatest curse for people of colour are white liberals. Because white liberals are there to treat black people as victims. And they make a fortune out of this. You know, they're all saying, well, the problem is this, and our job is to hold their hands and help them through. And I really have an aversion to do that. And I like to remind people of colour, we are courageous people that came to this country, and therefore we don't need to feel that we're
pioneers.
Exactly. And so one of the reasons I called the brand The Black Farmer, because I wanted to put it out there, because it begs the question, well, why aren't there black farmers in this country? Because I'm from a farming background. Most of the people who came from the Caribbean came from farming backgrounds. And then they went and took jobs in the city. There's a lot of black people that I meet that would love to actually go into farming, but actually it's about how do they get the sort of opportunities, how do they get rid of the stereotype that actually rural Britain is not a place for them.
I think the best way we get rid of those stereotypes is to tell the white liberals in places like Islington to shut up and get out into the real world. You know
that those white liberals hate people like you, and they hate people like me, because actually I'm not behaving how a black person is meant to behave. Really nice to meet you.
Absolutely brilliant, my friend.
Very nice to meet you.
We will try and come to your shop.
You must do.